I did not start off thinking I would be a writer. Obviously, I was a school teacher, and then I worked, in a tech industry. Although I was in human resources, I'm not a technical person. I'm not a programmer or anything like that. I've always loved to read. It's my main hobby, my main pastime that I love to do. And it always has been from the time I was a little kid. So when I started working at Microsoft, I thought it would be fun to try to start writing. So every night I would just write for an hour, and I really tried to be disciplined about that and stick to it. And I didn't know anything about becoming a writer really, but I just kept plugging away. And eventually I connected with an agent, and she's sent the book to publishing houses, and a publishing house wanted to publish the book, and they asked if I could do 3 books. And then at that point, I quit Microsoft. That was about 4.5 years ago, to become a full-time writer. But that's kind of my journey to becoming a writer. I definitely I wasn't someone who, when I was like, your age or something, or in college, thought, oh, I'm going to be a writer someday. It just kind of happened, because I got interested in it. When I was a kid, I would write stuff. I used to love comic books, superheroes and all that, Superman and Batman. And I used to try to write that kind of stuff and draw the pictures when I was a kid, maybe like, 12 years old or so. But again, it wasn't until maybe I got to be in my late 20s that I really started trying to write stories and really thinking hard about what it meant to write a good story. Because, it's not easy to write a story that people will find engaging and interesting. And you really have to study good writers and really think about how to create stories that will draw the reader's interest. And every time I at least try to start a new book, it seems to be just as difficult as it was the initial attempt. So, but it's a lot of fun. I find a real nice connection to the area where I live. All the evergreen trees and mountains and water. I love to swim during the summer, and during the winter, I like to cross-country ski, although I haven't done it so much in the last few years, but I really enjoy doing that. So I love snowy weather, and that kind of environment to me is so evocative, and it's kind of a natural for, like a Christmas time kind of story. That's when the book is set. And then in the second book, actually, part of it takes place in a town that I modeled on a town that lives is about 100 miles away from me. It's a very Christmassy kind of a place called Leavenworth. So yeah, the environment here, really a lot of the outdoors that's depicted in the Winterhouse books, because I enjoy this area so much. I would say the simple answer is I actually was not by that particular book or that particular character, although of course I'm familiar with the trilogy and with Pullman's writing. But I did reference the Golden Compass in Winterhouse, and I referenced a lot of books. The age of Elizabeth being 11, I thought would be ideal, because if I made her a little bit older, 12 or 13, she might be at a different start to be in more of a different stage of life, and it would be maybe a different kind of a story. 11 seemed to be a good age. You'll notice in a lot of stories of younger people, even in fairy tales going way back, a lot of times the parents are absent, or the kids live with someone who other than their real parents. And it's very interesting that you invoke, or that you mention Pullman, because I heard him speak once and he said something very interesting. He addressed this very thing. Like, why is it in so many stories, everything from, Hansel and Gretel to Harry Potter, we find characters without parents? And Pullman said, because in stories where kids are the heroes, you need to find a way to easily get the parents out of the way. And so if the parents are dead, or they passed away, or they were missing, or something like that, it's a very convenient way to very quickly make the child independent and have to go through tests and a journey on his own or her own. And I never thought of it that way, but Pullman's comment made a lot of sense to me. My youngest daughter is now 25, but when she was about 8 or 9, one day we walked to a little lake by our house. It's just a few blocks away. And she said, let's take some notebooks with us and draw pictures and write stories. So we went there, and I'm not an artist, but I drew, mountains, and I put a big house or a hotel in the mountains, and I called it Winterhouse because it looked wintry. And then on the back of the paper, I started writing a story. And for some reason, I thought, I'll call the girl Elizabeth. I don't really know why. I took that paper home, I put it away, and forgot about it. And then about a year later, my daughter comes to me and says, Dad, how is the progress going on that book? And I said, I haven't done a single thing. And she said, you should write that book, Winterhouse. And then my other kids heard her say that word. And my daughter's very spirited, very independent. And Elizabeth isn't exactly like my daughter, but the idea kind of came to me because I based her on my daughter. Those are called word ladders, where you start with one word and there's a terminating or final word, and you change one letter at a time to create the final word. Those were actually created by Lewis Carroll, who wrote the Alice in Wonderland books. He called them doublets, and they are a lot of fun. You really have to think creatively. How do you travel from one word to another? I thought it would be fun to work a word ladder into each chapter title or heading, because a reader would come to each chapter and think, oh, that I can play another game here and see how to do it. And some kids have told me, oh, I got from that word to that word faster than you did in chapter 6 or chapter whatever. But I love wordplay and word puzzles. And so you might, if you've happened to have seen the second book, each chapter, I just open it at random, so I don't even know what it says here. A shocking attack, chapter 14 in the second book. And then some of the letters are sort of in a gray font. And if you rearrange them, they form another word, taking, because something gets taken in that chapter. So I worked an anagram into every chapter title in the second book. I thought that would be a fun and a different kind of puzzle. And it was hard to do. By the way, the final word in each word ladder and the anagram in the second book, those words all have something to do specifically with the chapter in which they occur. Because if you just formed any word, it would be kind of too easy. You could just do anything you wanted. And then in the third book, this took me way too long, by the way. In the third book, here it is, I worked in hidden words into each chapter heading. So chapter 11, I just opened this around, it says, more pictures, more names. And then you notice some of the letters are kind of gray, and it says Morena, because in that chapter, there's a reference to someone in the family whose name is Morena. So again, I hope that kind of makes sense. Those are kind of another type of wordplay or word puzzle. I was hoping to have something deeper, although not in maybe in any dramatic way. I think for a story aimed at kids, if it gets too heavy on the deep stuff, it might lose their interest on the top stuff, But I wanted to show a girl who was put into new circumstances and had to rely on her own intelligence and spirit and ingenuity to kind of make new friends, fit into a new place. Young people are kind of forming who they're going to be, and it's a very age you can go a lot of different directions, at least I think, Readers would appreciate seeing someone put in a situation where she had to make a choice. And what does it mean as human beings to make better choices rather than poor choices? That's maybe about as deep as it would get. I wrote over a period of about 6 years, but that's because I was working full time and could only do it here and there and just, hour or so at night. The second and third books took me about 8 or 9 months each to write. So that's maybe a better indication of the length of time to do it. I have Victor Hugo, perhaps not, but Alexandre Dumas. One of my favorite books is the Count of Monte Cristo. It's quite a thrilling story. I really enjoy that book a lot. It's a classic, of course. You're all familiar with it. But I really enjoy lots of world literature. I enjoy reading the writings of some writers from Latin America. Gabriel Garcia Marquez, 100 Years of Solitude is one of my favorite books. I also like the contemporary Spanish writer Javier Marais. I think he's very good. There was a Portuguese writer, José Saramago, passed away about 10 or 12 years ago. There's also a writer from Italy named Ilana Ferrante, wrote a series, The Neapolitan Quartet, 4 books, and they're just fabulous. One of my favorite books or sets of books of all time is by Marcel Proust, Remembrance of Things Past. It's quite a difficult book, I guess you could say, or 7 volumes, but it's remarkable, and I'm sure many of you there are familiar with it or have even read it. But Proust is a literary hero of mine. That would be a lot of fun. I don't know if that would happen, because I've learned a little bit about the process, because actually the series has been what they call optioned. I'm very new to this whole business. I didn't really understand how this works, but basically a company has bought the rights to turn the Winterhouse books into like a TV series or a streaming series. Now, to clarify, I don't know if that will actually happen, but they are working on it now. They have hired a writer, and they are trying to hire a director, and then they would go to a place like Amazon or Hulu or Netflix and say, we've got this all ready to go, and then they would try to get interested. So I've already been told that I will not have any input into selecting or anything, actors or something like that. That would be a lot of fun. It's interesting you asked that question, because I really haven't thought too much about it, about who will sort of be ideally to play those people. But again, it would be, I would really have to keep my fingers crossed for it even to happen. Maybe it would be a series someday, and that would be a lot of fun. I will think about that question and try to think who would be the ideal players for the characters.